Bus hopping is the act of hopping from bus line to bus line, sometimes riding a bus for as little as one stop before you get on the next one, all in the hope of crushing buses along the way and getting your tag seen as much as possible. And in the late 90s, bus hopping was my life. And it wasn't something that I searched out, it was something I did as soon as I started riding, and possibly within the first week that I started riding, I started bus hopping. And for those of us who grew up in San Francisco, bus hopping is a very well-known phenomenon to us, but it's not necessarily a very well-known phenomenon outside the city, but in other places on Earth and at different times in our history, were other people out there bus hopping. But before I answer this question of if people were out there bus hopping in other cities, it's worth asking, were people in other cities even hitting buses? And the answer is absolutely. There were and still are scenes all throughout the Graff world where people have made a priority to hit buses. I saw a video recently coming out of Europe where a bunch of dudes on a street blocked a bus, like I think they put down some grates and just blocked that thing in and busted a piece on the side of the bus in a couple of minutes. And from time to time, I'll get comments from people that are living out in Finland, and shout out to all the riders and just all the people watching from Finland. And these riders from Finland tell me that people in current times prioritize hitting up on buses. But because I don't personally speak Finnish, I'm not a Finnish fool, I don't know this to be the case. I've never seen it myself. So for any of the Finnish homies out there that are getting down on buses, let me know and share some links with me. I also get a lot of comments from Australia, and they've told me that people have been hitting buses in that country dating back a couple of decades, and it's nothing new for them out there either. But the place that I'm most familiar with bus graffiti outside of San Francisco is the city of LA, and shout out to everybody in LA. Pachuco and gang graffiti in LA has an incredibly deep history, and there's still some tags that are running done in this fashion that are either close to, if not 100 years old. But personally, I look at this kind of gang graffiti as separate, as kind of its own thing. And when I talk about graffiti in LA, it's not what I'm talking about. And modern graffiti, the thing that you and I are a part of and the thing that we love, showed up in LA the same way it showed up in San Francisco. And that is, it came over from New York City, whether that be people from LA going out to New York and bringing it back, or people from New York bringing it to LA, or most commonly, the westward spread of hip hop culture starting in the late 70s. This is how graffiti culture is spread all throughout the world, and in these places that were inspired by NY, they emulated New York City and New York Graff locally. Oftentimes this meant that subway cars and light rail trains were the prestigious targets, but in places that they didn't have subway cars and trains, people went after buses. And in a lot of these places, they went after these buses the same way that riders were going after trains in New York City. Namely, they would sneak into yards and go hit outsider shots, maybe bust a piece, and get on their way. But in some of these other places, in addition to hitting yards, they were hitting buses right on the street. It was definitely like this in LA in the 80s, and riders were going after those RTD line buses. And this isn't just riders in LA City. You had a lot of people coming out of the San Fernando Valley. You had them coming out of just the greater LA area, period. And because kids could be living in one area and go to a school all the way across LA County, there's a lot of cross-pollination. And the Graff scene in LA at that time was extensive enough that you can hear famous fools, you can hear Taboo from the Black Eyed Peas talk about his experiences in present times hitting bus lines back in the day. You can also find news stories from that time that are widely available online where the riders who were hitting buses in those years talk about their experiences, and you can see some of these riders now giving interviews talking about these things in retrospect. And when you hear about these riders talk about their experiences, the terminology that they use really indicates what they were doing. And while I've heard some riders call it bus chasing, the term I've heard used the most is bus mobbing. I definitely wasn't down there in those days, and I've never lived a moment of my life in LA, but to my understanding, bus mobbing is a bunch of people getting together, 10, 15, 20 riders would meet up at a bus stop, and when one of those RTD line buses would pass by, they'd pounce on it and tag the crap out of it. And when these riders would mob these buses like this, within seconds, all the outside of the bus would be crushed. But even if this was really prevalent and people were catching a lot of outsider shots on buses in the 80s and 90s, people were hitting those insides of buses too. And so many riders were catching insider shots on these buses that the RTD line started putting undercover cops on the buses to catch people in the act. But in my opinion, is this the same thing as bus hopping. And no, I wouldn't call it that. I would just say it's tagging buses. And bus hopping is something else entirely. I described what bus hopping was at the very start of this video, and the environment that San Francisco has produced the ability to bus hop in the first place. And above really any other consideration, any other concern, at baseline, if you're gonna have bus hopping, you need a culture of bus usage. And in many places in this country, fools don't even have bus lines to ride. There's no bus stops. You might have something that takes you from one county to another, or maybe you can jump on a Greyhound or something like that, but you can't hop buses because maybe there's only one bus in your town. But in San Francisco, damn near everybody rides the bus, from rich to poor and everybody in between, the same way that damn near everybody rides the train out in New York City. And I can also add that there's really no stigma about riding the bus in the city. And in a lot of other places, you're kind of looked down on, especially you're looked down on for being poor, not having a car, not having anything to your name. That's why you're taking the bus. And a lot of people might be hesitant to take a bus if they feel like that stigma is going to be attached to them. But in San Francisco, like I said, everybody's on there. And in most neighborhoods in San Francisco, there's a bus stop every couple of blocks, and there's a ton of overlap between bus lines in the city. And where I personally grew up in San Francisco, it's not like a central part of the city. It's kind of away from a lot of stuff, and a lot of people would tell me, damn fool, you live in the cuts and I'm not really trying to go out there. But even with all that said, within just like a block or two of where I grew up, I could be on 5 different buses, and I could be on a bus that could take me down to the peninsula. This isn't particular to my neighborhood, this is damn near the whole city, and the city is so densely packed that you have people all over the place. All these people need to get around, all these people take the bus. And this is especially the case for younger kids that are in their early teens, even younger than that, and a lot of your bus hoppers in my time fit that description. San Francisco is also geographically a very small place, and your bus rides aren't going to be as long as, say, somewhere like in LA County, where you might be stuck on the bus an hour and a half. It could be like that in San Francisco too if there's a gang of traffic or something stupid happens on a bus, but otherwise you're taking these little short trips, and that facilitates bus hopping even more so. So for there to be a bus hopping scene to exist in a place, there's going to need to be a bunch of people in one place that has an extensive bus service that services everybody, and you're going to need a lot of young people in the mix taking the bus as well. But there's something else. You're also going to need an extensive graffiti scene, which San Francisco definitely had and continues to have. And as soon as Graff popped up in San Francisco, it found itself on buses. But there's another layer to this that needs to be described when we're talking about San Francisco's scene. And that is, a lot of San Francisco's graffiti scene was based out of the Mission District. A lot of writers lived out there. You'd see Graff all over the Mission District all the time from some of the best writers in graffiti's history. And when I got my start as a writer in 1996, I was going to school in the Mission District, and the Mission District at that time was still a predominantly Latino neighborhood. Latinos started moving to the neighborhood more so in the late 50s and early 60s, and by the end of the 60s, the neighborhood was a majority Latino neighborhood due to the phenomenon of white flight. And very early in the neighborhood's history, there was a mode of socializing where people would just go out on the Mission Street, which had a gang of stores that had a lot of stuff going on, and they just walk up and down Mission Street, run into other people, run into their friends, meet other people, look to party, and look to meet girls. Then, just like now, these groups of young Latinos that be out on the street just kicking it, doing their thing, were getting harassed by the police. The Chicano movement of the late 60s reclaimed the words Chicano and Cholo, and the Cholo movement that superseded the Pachuco movement found its way to the Bay Area in the 70s, and along with it came lowriding. And as a kid, when I would see fools that had lowriders out on Mission Street, when fools would be out there cruising, or when my friend's older brother brought his car out and I'd be bugging him to hit the hydros and just let me sit in the car and turn the engine on, I loved it. But when the cops in the 70s saw young Latinos driving fly cars in the neighborhood, they harassed them. This led a lot of people to just say, hey, I'm not messing with Mission Street. I don't want to go out there. I'm going to go find a place to go kick it at. So people kicked it at secondary locations like the lot or on stoops or just out with their friends on corners. but it also led a lot of young people to hop on buses, to go bus to bus, line to line, and just cruise that way. And they got on buses away from the police, away from a lot of nonsense, but obviously, it's San Francisco, it's the 80s, nonsense is gonna follow you, especially on a bus, but they'd be able to meet other young people, find out where the party's at, find out where certain substances were, where the girls are at, where everybody's kicking it, and they could do anything because they had the freedom to be out of their neighborhood and be somewhere else in a very short amount of time. And going from place to place and jumping from bus to bus, as I said at the start of this video, is bus hopping. And like I said about LA, when Graff arrived in San Francisco, it was inspired by the riders from New York, specifically hitting subways. And when Graff hit the city, naturally, people would hit buses. They hit the yards, but especially since they were already bus hopping, they were already going bus to bus anyway, and this culture existed, they just added a layer of Graff to what they did. This is how bus hopping, as we all know it, came to be. And when I started bus hopping in 1996, the bus hopping I was doing wasn't all that different from what my graffiti ancestors in the city had been doing a decade prior. And many of these graffiti ancestors were young Latinos from the Mission District, and without them, Graff wouldn't be the same in the city or in the world. And I'm glad that I got to experience it as I did, and that's because bus hopping in the city had an expiration date that none of us knew was coming. It's impossible to see into the future. It's impossible to know what technological innovations are going to come, what people are going to do, how laws are going to change. You might have some insight into these things just reading the signs of the times, but otherwise, you have no idea when the thing that you love to do is going to stop. And bus hopping by the late 2000s with the introduction of cameras effectively went into decline. And graffiti in the 2000s, just as a general, was under attack in the city, just period. There are felony charges for stuff now, there was more fines, there was just more consequences to doing what we love to do. But that's not to say that bus hopping completely died out. It made a comeback during the pandemic. And people now were able to get on these same buses that take you everywhere, that allow you to jump multiple lines, that have buses that go all over the city. And because they were required to have a mask on, that meant their identities were hidden and those cameras were useless. And even if too many people, especially in San Francisco, won't bat an eye at one singular person wearing a mask, maybe 5 to 10 people getting on the bus who are younger people who look like they tag and they all have masks on their face will absolutely draw attention from the bus drivers and possibly from the cops. And for you guys out there that didn't get to experience bus hopping and would like to experience bus hopping now, unless you have all these things going on in your city, you're not going to have it anyway. And trying to recreate something in another place stripped of this context and just stripped of the realities is pointless. And if you love Graff and your scene has particularities that highlight the local flavor of what you're doing, or just a scene period that you love to be a part of, enjoy it now, because you never know when it's going to be gone.